Hi everyone, and welcome back to Algebra 2. I'm Mrs. Stillwell and I'll be covering our lesson for today. Please remember the rules of note-taking. If you see it on your screen, you should be writing it in your notes. Some of you printed the notes out ahead of time, which will allow you to just watch the video and work through the examples without having to feel rushed. Feel free to add things in your own words so that they're easier to study later on. Don't forget to hit pause and replay as often as you need to. This is especially true during the U-tries and the example problems. Okay, here we go. Today we will be tackling Chapter 4, Polynomial Functions, Section 5, Solving Polynomial Equations. This is Part B. Learning targets are to graph polynomial functions and to find the zeros of polynomial functions using factoring. There are other ways to find the zeros. Today we are focusing just on the factoring portion. Okay, vocabulary and concepts. If a factor is raised to an odd power, like x to the third would be an example, the graph crosses the x-axis at that root or at that point. If the factor is raised to an even power, like x to the fourth, the graph hits the x-axis at that point or that root, but does not cross it. It bounces back up or down. So it hits the x-axis and bounces up. It could also hit the x-axis and bounce down. So this one crosses the x-axis. This one hits it and bounces down, or hits it and bounces back up. It does not go across. Odd powers go across. Even powers bounce. So that's the first new concept. Steps to graphing a polynomial. First step. Using your notes from 4.1a and 4.1b, decide what the basic characteristics of your graph will be, leading coefficients and degrees. Set the polynomial equal to 0, then factor and solve. Once you have found your zeros in step B, use the information above, that's in number 1, all the way up here, to determine if the graph crosses or bounces at the x-axis. Once you have placed the x-intercepts on the graph, sketch the rest. Sketching because you're not actually finding other points, which makes it shorter and easier for you. Okay, let's see what we can do as far as trying some example problems. Our first example. Here we have our equation. I can see that the leading coefficient is negative, and it's to the power of 4. Leading coefficient was negative, and the degree was 4, which means it's going to look roughly like this. Please look back to your 4.1 notes if you don't remember what those will look like. The next step we have is to actually factor the problem. So I am going to go through, and using my factoring skills, I am going to first divide out a -2. That does a couple of things. It makes the number smaller, which makes them easier to deal with. If I divide this by -2, if I divide that by -2, if I divide that by -2, and if I divide that by -2, it still stays 0. Now I am ready to factor. I can see here a quadratic. It's a quadratic because this is to the 4th power and this is half that size, and this doesn't have any variables. So the only things that are going to multiply evenly to make an x to the 4th power is x squared times x squared. 16, 1 times 16, 2 times 8, and 4 times 4. I need the set that add to be 8. The only ones that add to be 8 are 4 times 4. This says the signs are the same and they are both negative, better known as -4 and -4 make a 8. Now, this is factoring a quadratic. If you don't want to do it the way I just showed you, please feel free to do it any way you would like to, as long as you end up with the same answers. Now, what I notice is I have a difference of squares here, and the exact same difference of squares here, which means I actually have another step to do. That splits to x times x, and this is a -2 and a +2. And this one, of course, does exactly the same thing, so x -2 and x +2. So, writing those factors out, I have 2 x -2 factors, and I have 2 x +2 factors. So I am ready to graph. Now please notice I'm not going to put any y values up here because I don't want to work that hard. All I want to do is take the answer that comes out of this, which is a +2, and the answer that comes out of that, which is a -2, better known as their roots. So I know it hits at +2, and I know it hits at -2. I know again from my beginning that it's going to head like this. So I know that it hits here, bounces down, hits here, and it's going to bounce down. So as I am sketching my graph, I realize that all it can happen is it's got to go like this, and go down, and go like this, and go down, and I have my graph. Now, if you are one of those people who really, oops, sorry, you couldn't even see me do that. The points here and here, because the original said that it was a negative, I knew it was going to face downward, and these being exactly the same, power of 2, since they're even, it's going to bounce. Now, if you're one of those people who really like to have a perfect graph, you could also make an XY table to make your graph a little bit more perfect, but for what we're doing right now, that's all that you need. Okay, short, easy peasy lemon squeezy. Let's try the next one. This is a you try. This lesson is very, very short. So if you would please go ahead and pause your camera. Give this a try. Make sure that you do the very best you can, and then come back when you are ready to work it. Okay, welcome back. First thing we're going to talk about is our leading coefficient. Our leading coefficient is positive. Our degree is 3. If I look back at my chart, I know that my graph is going to look something like that. Now I'm to my factoring set. So I've got x to the third plus x squared minus 6x is equal to 0. I can't factor out any numbers, but I can certainly factor out an x from all of them. And when I take one x away from each one of them, that's what's left over. I've got a quadratic left, so factor the quadratic. This is why we spent so much time practicing our factoring before we got to this part. X squared is x times x. Multiples of 6, that would be 1 times 6. Also 2 times 3, those are the factors of 6. I need the set that subtracts to be, remember if there's no number there, we know it's a 1, so subtracts to be 1. Those don't, but those do. I know that the signs are different, and the biggest one is get that positive. I can also check this way. I have a +3 and a -2. That does make a +1. So I am ready to find my roots here. So right here gives me a 0, and that gives me a 2, and that one gives me a -3. And I am ready to graph. I have a point at 0, x-intercept. I have an x-intercept at 2, and I have an x-intercept at -3. I know that it looks roughly, again, we talked about this already, like this. So connecting those points like that. It goes up and down and up. Now let's talk a little bit about why that did not bounce. Power of 1 is odd. It will cross at 0. Power of 1 up here, that's odd. It will cross and not bounce at 2. And right here, power of 1, that is also odd, which means it will cross, not bounce, at -3. That would be my sketch. Again, if you would really like to, you can always make an XY table and plug in your values like we always do and get other Y values and put in some more points. But for what we're doing right now, that works out to be just fine. Okay, this one was a short, sweet, hopefully easy video. Remember, first thing you do is always decide on the leading coefficient and the degree. Get your rough shape figured out. Once you've got that, factor it. Put those x-intercepts on your graph. Decide if they bounce or cross. And then connect your points in a smooth curve. If you need any more help with this, please make sure you let your teacher know during your Algebra 2 period, or make sure that you go to the tutorial sessions that are Tuesday and Thursday from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock. Thanks for joining us for another lesson in Algebra 2. Have a great day.